Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. That's the main man there. Greg was just asking me what the hell I'm talking about on the radio show on a regular basis with, with the NFL downtime. But there's plenty of football things to keep us afloat, Greg. And I know you've been absorbed in college football tape in preparation for this, and you got a really fun trip coming up this week.
Yeah, no, I'm heading. This will be the third year in a row. I'm heading down to the O-line Masterminds. It's in Frisco, Texas, just outside of Dallas, and it's a really good trip. I mean, offensive line play is something that you don't necessarily grow up. Even though I've been doing this a long time, and I've tried to learn from as many O-line coaches as I can. That's not something that just comes naturally. It's just like, and it's funny because Duke Manyweather, who does an amazing job, he, Lane Johnson, Jeff Schwartz, they're the guys that I think are the major guys that put all this together every year. But Duke Manyweather every year starts off by talking about how O-line is a learned thing because no 8-year-old kid says to his dad if he wants to start playing football, "Hey, Dad, I want to put my hand in the ground and that's and not see anything." No 8-year-old really says that. So it's a really learned position. Whether you're talking center, guard, tackle, maybe a little more glamorous, but at the end of the day, that's all that stuff has to be taught with all the detail, the nuance, the subtleties, the techniques. And, I keep wanting to learn more and more about that. So when I study offensive line play, whether it's individuals in college, whether it's watching the NFL and seeing the cohesion of a unit in different schemes, you just try to keep learning. That's sort of the idea.
Yeah, and I just when we were wrapping up mini camp, when last you were here a couple of weeks ago, JC Latham talked about that a lot. He had gone down to Dallas initially outside of O-line masterminds to train with Duke Manyweather and a couple of other
Yeah.
people. Trey Smith included, the guard for the Kansas City Chiefs, who Vols fans here in Tennessee know very
And I
well.
talked to him it's funny you mentioned him. I talked to him last year quite a bit at this event. He's a super impressive kid.
You talking about Trey or JC?
Trey Smith. I don't know JC, but Trey Smith I talked to last year. He's super impressive kid.
Yeah, no, every and he's been that way, been regarded that way ever since he
Yeah.
was a prospect coming or a recruit coming into Tennessee and was thought very highly of during his time there. I know that's continued into Kansas City. So Titans fans got a lot of questions about their offensive line unit. I know that they have we've talked several times about their prioritization of just fielding a professional offensive line
Yeah.
group and good to see guys like JC, young guys in their career, taking advantage of as many of those opportunities as humanly possible. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you learn out of that when next we get together. But we're going to continue our divisional previews this week, and the Titans do play the NFC West. It's the AFC West and the NFC West for Tennessee on their divisional schedule this year. And while it may not be at the peak of its powers anymore, Greg, where it was at one point thought of as one of the toughest divisions, there's still plenty of good teams, good coaches,
Oh
and
yeah.
fun roster constructions to talk about with all four of these teams. Let's start with the Rams, since that is the Titans' home opener opponent in week two. And I would like to start with the defensive side of the ball because they don't make many first round picks in LA in the last couple of years under Les Snead, but damned if they didn't hit on the one in the last couple of years that they've made in Jared Verse, and an unholy terror on the defensive side of the ball. And to pair him with Braden Fisk, his former Florida State teammate,
Yeah.
seemed to have really paid dividends for them. But it's more than just those two, Greg. And I wonder if you could speak to kind of the overarching principles that you see when you watch that Rams defense play.
Well, I thought that was one of the most interesting things to watch last year as the season progressed, Buck, was watching the development of the Rams defensive front four. This is a team that in pure pass situations, including third down, obviously, they played a ton of dime. And so they really relied on their front four as the rush unit. And boy, were they good down, I'd say the last 7, 8 games. You mentioned Jared Verse. He's a power player. He's a speed to power guy, and it translated from college to the NFL. And then as the season progressed, Braden Fisk really started to come on as well, getting more and more snaps. Kobe Turner, he was a third round pick 2 years ago. Really good player, really good player. They do an outstanding job with their inside stunts. Turner, Fisk, at times Versus involved with that when they bring him as well as a looper on stunts. And they have Byron Young, the Tennessee kid, who's a really solid player as well. So this front four, particularly in pure pass situations, was really, really good down the stretch last year and a defining feature of their team. Obviously, with Sean McVay, you always think offense, and we'll get to that, but that front four was a definite defining feature of that team. And as I said, they played a ton of dime, maybe as high a percentage as any team in the league over the last 7, 8 games. And their dime players probably well known to Nashville people and Tennessee people. Obviously, Jalen McCullough was
Mhm.
their dime, and he played a lot of snaps, and he played very well as their dime, kind of hybrid linebacker safety.
Yeah, and it's a just in terms of, and I know we don't typically get into or don't mess with the salary cap implications of things like that, but it's just such a cost-effective way that they've gone about building a highly effective defense, Greg, that you see teams envious of in the way that they've been able to maximize the value of these players while focusing primarily their spending on offense to be able to get the most out of the last remaining years of Matt Stafford, who I'm sure we'll talk about. And based off our conversation with Brian Callahan at the live install and his previous work with Matt Stafford, you
Yeah.
can tell how much respect league wide, not just based
Oh,
off Callahan's comments, and this is Stafford's been a known commodity for a number of years, of course, but just how much of a difference he has made to everything that Sean McVay wants to do on that side of the ball.
yeah, and I think, he's not thought of this way just in general conversation when people, say, "Oh, give me a list of the 4 or 5 best quarterbacks in the league." We know, the usual suspects come up, round up the usual suspects, so to speak. And Stafford's name is not there, but that's the way he's thought of in the league. He is thought of, and he's done it for a very long time. He's an elite player. And he's still playing at a really, really high level. He's incredibly intelligent. One of the things he does exceptionally well is audible and check at the line of scrimmage. I can see plays in my mind's eye right now where he's done that and ended up making a big play. He just understands. He's been doing this for a long time. So you start there. And then, of course, who would have thought that Kyron Williams, a fifth-round pick out of Notre Dame 3 years ago, would be a back that has become a foundation back? I mean, he had 316 carries a year ago, Buck, and he didn't even play the final game of the season. Now, they've changed their run game dramatically over the last number of years. Now, we don't know if Sean McVay changed it just for tactical reasons, or I don't know the answer to this anyway, or if he did it for Kyron Williams. But if people remember back when they had that Super Bowl and lost to the Patriots, when they had Todd Gurley, who for about 3 years was phenomenal, they were zone based. Now there's much more gap scheme. There's much more what we call duo. The zone element is always going to be there to some extent, but they've really transitioned their run game quite a bit.
Yeah, and very effectively so. They lose Cooper Kupp, who we'll get to in a second because he stays in the division, and was a big part of what they did,
Yep.
and had so much success with him. And despite him being slightly derailed by injury, continues to be a well thought of, highly thought of, and very intelligent player. But they do bring in Devontae Adams, Greg, and I wonder, he's up there in age at this point, but he is also still an effective player to go with Puka Nacua and Tutu
Yeah.
Atwell. They obviously have a few other players in that wide receiver room as well, but those are the principal parties. How do you like the fit of Devontae Adams, understanding his skill set and what McVay likes to do?
I love it. In fact, I remember talking to Ross Tucker. This was before Adams signed, and he was clearly, not the Jets were not re-signing him. He was a free agent. And I said to Ross Tucker, he asked me, what teams do you think might be a good fit? And the first team that came to my mind was the Rams. And then he signed there. And the reason is because they're so good at scheming their wide receivers. I mean, Adams has obviously been a great player in his career, and in his prime, he could win one-on-one. He's not exactly the same player, but they do a great job of just scheming their players with formations. They're a high percentage motion team relative to the rest of the NFL. The way they use Puka Nacua is just absolutely brilliant because Nakua is not the kind of guy you line up at boundary X and just say win 1-on-1.
Hmm.
Can he do that at times? Yes, but that's not who he is. And the way they use him with the reduced splits, with the motion element to their offense, they'll do the same thing with Devontae Adams. So I thought that was a great fit for him. And their pass game is difficult to stop.
It's going to be a tough test just to bring things back locally for the Titans to go at Denver week one and then home for the LA Rams in week two. The
Go.
first 6 weeks of that schedule we're going to learn a lot about this football team and just how much Cam
Yeah.
Ward can make a difference for them, and that offensive line group, obviously, given the strength of the defenses that they will play. They will see the Niners on the road this year, a little later on in the season, Greg. And obviously, that roster undergoing some transition, most notably Deebo Samuel traded from San Francisco to Washington. But we didn't see as much of Ricky Pearsall as they would have liked last year for obvious reasons. The scary situation with him
Yes.
surviving the gunshot wound and then being able to come back in some way and participating last year. Juwan Jennings, who I think they think highly of based on their utilization of him and hoping for a better season, a more productive season out of Brandon Ayuk now that they've invested so heavily in Brock Purdy. Christian McCaffrey dealing with injuries as well, Greg. He is such a versatile piece, but the availability obviously has hurt that in what they've been able to do. And they retain Kyle Juszczyk after figuring out a more contractually palatable situation for him. Where are your biggest questions about the Niners offense this year in particular?
It's funny. I think that they're going to have a good offense. I mean, they'll have um, I guess the receiver situation, they're counting on Pearsall. I really liked Ricky Pearsall coming out of Florida. I thought when he did get a chance to play last year, and I don't forget he missed a lot of time. I thought he showed flashes. They expect him to, he's a different player than Debo, but they expect him to replace him. Juwan Jennings, there's a great example of scheme fit because this is an offense that runs more short to intermediate routes and works the middle of the field. A lot of Purdy every year is among the league leaders in 20 plus yard completions, but so much of that is run after catch. They're not necessarily a throw it down the field offense. And Jennings, he's big, he's physical. Another Tennessee player who I remember watching him coming out in 2020. He does not run well relative to what you want receivers, but I just remember him in the SEC being physical and competitive, and he caught the ball and he was tough to bring down, and that's all translated to the league. And it fits really well with what they do with all those short routes, those in-breaking routes where you have to catch the ball in traffic and catch through contact. And Jennings is really, really good at that. And then they brought in Demarcus Robinson, who everywhere he goes, he produces to the extent that he's used and deployed. And one player that's interesting to watch and is Jacob Cowing. Now he's a second-year player, a fourth-round pick a year ago. We'll see. They've got a pretty big receiver room right now, but Cowing is has an explosive. He may be the most purely explosive of this group.
Yeah. On the other side of the ball, a down year for the Niners in
Yeah,
2024 defensively, and just attrition, injuries can get a team any given year, and it seemed to be the Niners' year on both sides of the ball last year, where it just started to erode them away down the stretch to the point where they still found ways to be competitive. They didn't completely bottom out as a football
yeah,
team, but clearly had some setbacks. They invested on that side of the ball in the draft.
they sure
Michael
did.
Williams in the first round and Alfred Collins in the second round. Greg Nick Martin in the third and C.J. West, an Indiana boy,
That's right, a
in the
Hoosier.
fourth, who I really enjoyed watching his time in Bloomington. Really a fun player in the mix. And San Francisco has always prioritized the defensive line. It's going to be interesting to see Robert Saleh back as the defensive coordinator
Yes.
there. I know that the familiarity there was as big a reason to bring him back as any. Defensively, what are your biggest questions about San Francisco right
Yeah. I mean, I think they're expecting young players to play a lot and have a role. And with young players, obviously, you like them because you draft them. But as we speak, early in July before training camp, there are questions. Look, I'm sure they would love Mikael Williams to play opposite Nick Bosa and to play 45, 50 snaps a game. I'm sure they would like Alfred Collins to play 30 snaps a game. And Alfred Collins, if he can play to what his physical and athletic traits are, could be a dominant force. He's 6'6", 332 with ridiculously long arms. I mean, he's kind of a freak of nature. They're counting on a Renardo Green, a second round pick a year ago in 2024 to play on the outside. He played well last year. Malik Mustafa, the safety from Wake Forest, another draft choice from 2024, who had moments for sure last year. But you're right; they really went heavy in the draft on defense. They brought in Robert Saleh, who's obviously a very good defensive coach. But I don't want to say there are questions because we don't. Well, let's put it this way: there are questions, but I don't want to say there are issues because they obviously feel with their draft choices that these guys are going to play meaningful snaps and be meaningful contributors.
Yeah, no, I don't want to indicate that those things would be issues. I guess just more curiosities about how
I
that
agree.
personnel, how that roster is going to work with a known commodity in Robert Saleh, who's obviously not going to run exactly the same stuff, but he has some
Yeah.
tendencies that we are very well familiar with during his extensive time in the NFL. The big ticket item at quarterback, Sam Darnold, this offseason went to Seattle. And they are dealing with a variety of different changes in Seattle this time of year with the acquisition of Clint Kubiak, who's going to be their offensive coordinator. Ben Grubb moves on. They changed the quarterback situation, obviously, and the wide receiver room looks different than it has, significantly different than it has in the last
Yeah.
couple of years. MVS and Cooper Kupp replaced DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who ended up here in Tennessee. Sam Darnold is going to be one of the more interesting players league wide because people giving Kevin O'Connell a significant amount of credit, understandably so, for helping to rehabilitate the career of Sam Darnold. Now he's going to have a lot more pressure on him, and I wonder what you make of that offensive line group in front of him, Greg, because that seemed to be one of their biggest bugaboos as a football team in 2024.
Yeah, they struggled inside. They struggled at guard for a number of years. Um, their hope is that Christian Haynes, a third round pick from Connecticut in 2024, and the first round pick this year, Gray Zabel, they're hoping that those two guys can be their guards. So we'll see how it plays out. But the thing about Darnold, I think one reason they really wanted to bring him in is the play action under center element because Clint Kubiak, comes from the school of under center, run game, outside zone, play action, work off that, really define things well and cleanly when you can for your quarterback. You can do that in normal down and distance situations. Darnold was, I believe, had the second most under center play action dropbacks in the league a year ago after Jared Goff and was very, very good at it in the Kevin O'Connell offense. And I think they felt that that translates well to what Clint Kubiak wants to do with this offense. And the run game, the hope is, of course, that Kenneth Walker can be healthy because he has a lot of talent. You never know how a seventh round pick's going to play out. They could cut him, after 1 week of training camp. But I really like Damian Martinez. I was really surprised he lasted until the seventh round. He was at Oregon State. He transferred to Miami. I really like him. I think he's an NFL back. So we'll see how it plays out. But this team clearly wants to run the ball and work off that.
On the other side of the ball, you can't talk about
Huh,
Seattle's defense without talking about that secondary, Greg. And the rich
huh.
continue to get richer there with Nick Manwari in the second round. But I mean, we got to see you. I believe, were here for those joint training camp practices with Seattle last year.
Last year, yeah, it
Uh,
was.
uh,
Yep, yep.
and that was my first opportunity to see guys like Reek Woolen up close and personal, Devin Witherspoon as well, Julian Love, Kobe Bryant as their safeties, and they recently acquired Shaq Griffin here in the last couple of days to work back into that mix to give them some additional depth. Just an incredibly physical unit. Nobody's gonna. Seattle obviously famous for defense in the last couple of years, and the Legion of Boom being the height of those heights. But this is a fun, physical, and fast group that I just can't wait to watch on the field in 2025.
And Mike McDonald's a really good defensive coach. I mean, he's the head coach, but it'll be his defense, obviously. And they've got a lot of pieces on this defense. I mean, they were probably thrilled when Emanwari was there because that was in the second round, and he was definitely a first round talent. But you think of what McDonald did with Kyle Hamilton with the Baltimore Ravens. Emanwari is a similar style player in terms of size, length, movement, versatility. You mentioned the secondary; it's very good, but they're really good up front as well. They're going to count on Byron Murphy, who was their first round pick a year ago out of Texas. This will be his second season to start to come on, which he did a year ago. When you talk to people in Seattle, they'll tell you that Jaron Reed is kind of the sheriff, and he's a critical piece to everything they they do, even though he's, not a dominant impact player in the way we think of it, but he's so important. They signed Demarcus Lawrence, who's just a pro, understands the little things, the subtlety, set the edge in the run game, sort of a do your job type player. Um, I know it didn't work out in Tennessee for whatever reason, but Ernest Jones is a really complete linebacker, and they re-signed him. This is a defense with a lot of talent, Buck, and with Mike McDonald, coordinating it, this could be one of the top five type defenses in the league this year.
Yeah, I'm sure that a good portion of NFL fans know that the Seahawks won 10 games in Mike McDonald's first year, and a lot of that credit due to Geno Smith making things happen despite the offensive line situation. But that defense gives them a chance every time they take the field, and that's going to be a big part of who they are. Again, obviously, in 2025. We'll finish with Greg. I honestly think they're the most interesting team in this division, just because there's so many different pieces and parts. Monty Ossenfort, who I know well during his time in Tennessee, has been working diligently to try and get this roster back up to a level of meaningfully competitive. And they were scrappy last year, Arizona. I don't know how many people were seeking out Cardinals games. I don't know how often they ended up on the matchup show. But just on both sides of the ball, an interesting and competitive team. Marvin Harrison Jr., ascending talent. We'll see what happens in year two. But I can't imagine a scenario in which they don't look around and try and run more of the offense through him, given what he has the potential to be.
Yeah, they didn't make a ton of changes on the offensive side of the ball. So it'll be interesting, and I have no problem admitting this, and I've even talked to some coaches about it, and they all kind of shake their head, and maybe they feel the same way. But I just don't have a great feel for what Kyler Murray is as an NFL quarterback. I think that there are times he can be really special because he throws the ball really well. Because he's short, he's mastered the art of kind of throwing the ball falling away, which normally you would never teach a quarterback. But he's in the 5'10", 5'11" range, so he's probably been doing that since he started playing quarterback. So I don't hold that against him. That's the way he's had to play the position. And he throws the ball really well. He's dynamic as a mover. There are times he just looks like he's impossible to stop. And then there's other times I just am trying to figure out what exactly he is. You know, so we'll see what their offense is. I love James Conner. I mean,
Yeah.
and I actually really like Trey Benson. I think they've got a really good 1-2 punch right there with their run game, which I think they want to run the ball as a foundation. Defense is where they made their changes. Obviously, the head coach, Jonathan Gannon, is a defensive guy. Nick Rawlis is their D coordinator. Two really smart young guys. I mean, these guys are super smart. They drafted Walter Nolan, who I thought was the best defensive tackle prospect in this draft. They drafted Will Johnson, who was injured in college but healthy. A lot of people thought he was a top 12 type pick in this draft. Denzel Burke made it to the fifth round, the Ohio State corner. I thought he was a better player than that based on tape. Josh Sweat they signed. They have Calais Campbell, who still plays for what he's asked to do at a pretty high level. This is going to be an intriguing defense, and they do some things. I don't want to go into the weeds here, Buck, because people can't see it, but they do some really interesting things on defense that not many teams do, and that means you've got to prepare differently when you play them.
Yeah, and the pass rush is the thing that they've been trying to get right in the last couple of years. And
Yes.
Sweat, we've talked about this within the context of guys like Milton Williams, right? Dudes on that Eagles defense who
Yes.
were, I hesitate to call them role players. That almost seems to diminish their impact a little bit. But they had enough depth in Philadelphia that they could
Yes.
use these guys as efficiently as humanly possible. So now a dude like Sweat, who's going to be relied upon more heavily than he's ever really been in his career, that is going to be one of those pieces that I think helps define either their success overall as a unit or, what maybe not
Yeah.
outright failure, but their level of effectiveness.
And they've got a lot of young players on defense. And again, it's the same deal. We just spoke about the Niners. the Cards are in the same situation. They've drafted guys the last couple of years. Darius Robinson from Missouri, he was a first round pick. He ended up being injured a lot last year. They're counting on him to be a factor. They drafted Jordan Birch out of Oregon this year in the third round. Cody Simon, Ohio State in the fourth round. I mean, they've drafted a lot of defensive players. When you watch their tape, and I ended up seeing them a ton last year on tape, so I'm very familiar with their players. Their two best players a year ago, no surprise, would be Buda Baker, a really good football player, and the other surprise would be Mac Wilson, number two, who's a very versatile piece for them. Lines up all over. He was a big factor in their defense, but they want to get their defense right. And as I said, with Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis, I mean, they've got two super intelligent young coaches. This is going to be an intriguing team to watch to see how it all plays out.
It's a really fun schedule that Tennessee has this year. I don't know how fun it will be for the Titans on the field, but there's just a lot of intriguing opponents to your
Yeah.
point, and the NFC West certainly has what four from top to bottom.
Some people believe, because I talk to people, and I know you do too, and you obviously do radio every day. But the Titans are viewed as an intriguing team this year, by the way, as well, because I really haven't spoken to anybody who doesn't feel like Cam Ward is a really good prospect. Now, again, he's a rookie, so we have no idea, and he's going to have ups and downs. And by the way, he could have a really down week one, and I hope people don't think, oh, that means he can't play. They're on the road against the team that led the league in sacks a year ago and has a really good defense with a veteran coordinator who's been around the block a few times. So I hope people don't start, trying to evaluate every throw as if it's career defining. There's going to be ups and downs, but they're an intriguing team, with what they've done in the offseason. And look, as you know, I got a chance to talk to Mike Borgonzi when I was and Dave Ziegler when I was down there, and I'll be back for training camp. They know, the guys who've been in the business know, obviously they're not going to sit in front of a microphone and say things like, well, if we can win 6 games or 8 games, that's good. No one says that. You can't say that. And nor do they think that way. If we had Brian Callahan here right now, he'd say we're going to win every Sunday. And by the way, that's the way he should feel. That's the way every coach should feel. And they do feel that way, by the way.
Listen, there's no better way. I think with this schedule to put that that intrigue around them to the test, because I think we're going to learn a lot about them. And as you say, not to define Cam Ward by just this rookie season alone, but I think we're going to learn a lot about them as a team and Cam Ward's ability to help elevate things around them based on the degree of difficulty that they're going to be up against in his rookie year. So I think that's
And by the
a
way,
well-made point by you.
just one final point. We talked about this when after I was down there for minicamp. That's why Jeffrey Simmons is jabbering and trash talking with Cam Ward, because they're trying to find out a guy like Jeffrey Simmons, who is as competitive as they come, and he knows that the only way he gets to a Super Bowl is if this team has a quarterback, and he wants to see what Cam Ward is made of, because you know what? Mini camp is one thing, but when you're on the road in Denver and in front of 70,000 people and it's 3rd and 9 in a critical situation, your quarterback better be, is he going to succeed all the time? Of course not. But he can't be nervous. He can't be scared. He's got to go out there and one of the things I learned, John Gruden was really good at this, and he always used to have NFL film his quarterbacks calling plays in the huddle. Okay, now that West Coast offense is extremely wordy. That's one reason he wanted it. But you also want to hear how they call it, because someone like Kevin Zeitler, he's 36 years old. Okay, all he wants to do is get to a Super Bowl. He doesn't care if I'm playing quarterback, you're playing quarterback, or Cam Ward's playing quarterback. That's not really that important to him. All he cares about is that guy be strong, ready to go, confident, get in the huddle, call the play like, you know what? We're going to make this work, and I don't care. I don't give a crap about anything else. We're making this play work. And that's what you want to see from Cam Ward, because there's going to be some downs.
Our early indications are promising, but we'll see what it looks like when he gets truly put to the test, as you say there. Greg, always good to catch up. We've only got 2 divisions left, and by then it'll be training camp, brother. And
And by then it's training camp. I know, it's crazy.
we're off and rolling. That's all right. I've got too much free time on my hands anyway right now, Greg. I need training camp in my life to just just to get back into the swing of things and get back into another football season.
Right. Well, good. I'm
I'm
with you on
looking
that.
forward to it. Enjoy your trip, buddy, and I'll look forward to catching up with you and learning a little bit of what you were able to glean when next we get together. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Buck.